Luton fans want to see young footballers with a bit of pace looking their man in the eye and saying, come on then, let's have you.
If that's a starting point for the Ming Fanner, you don't get him out of the team.
There's absolutely a footballer in him.
Every time Luton have won a game, they've done it via a clean sheet, and this was the cleanest of the clean sheets.
Can Luton play football in a 4-2-3-1? Well, you better believe we can, because the move for the penalty was delicious. I'm really optimistic about what we can do under this formation. Of course I am. I've been banging on about it on here for the last 12 months. I think we can live up to what we was told we were going to get in that Gary Sweet interview of playoffs and automatic promotion preferably.
We've been on a sort of downward spiral for so long. I half understand some people who are just really relentlessly not having it. I can. Somewhere along the line you've got to stop the rot, and that's what that performance could be.
I'm just glad that I sat there and enjoyed a game of football for 45 minutes.
There were signs there that this team will fight for each other, play for each other, can pass to each other. It's a very pleasing Luton weekender. Tyson Gallagher won her title fight as well.
It was a win for the Town on Saturday afternoon as a back four delivered a clean sheet and a 1-0 win against Doncaster Rovers. And alongside me to look back on an afternoon of a bit more positivity is the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe. Jimbo, that's exactly what it was, wasn't it? A bit more positive.
Exactly what we wanted, and hopefully the start of something.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We'll talk all about that, what it means and everything else right after this intro. Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category in the Football Content Awards. Once again, this season the show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned prior to the intro, we're looking back at Luton Town 1, Doncaster Rovers 0, much more positive afternoon of football. And we'll talk about everything that went on both sides of that because it was quite a big week in terms of communication for the Town as well. So we'll cover all of that. And I've got Jimbo alongside me to do exactly that. We'll focus on the game first though, Jimbo, because, well, it's all change, wasn't it? We wanted all change. It had to be all change after Lincoln. And I think even in the Gary Sweet interview, it kind of intimated that things had to change. Did change. We got our back four. We got Shaden Morris starting. We got 3 points.
It's all down to us then, isn't
it? Easy game this, isn't it, really? But it was good though, wasn't it? Because, I mean, I saw a lot of people outside the ground yesterday and near enough all of them were like, trepidation's probably a strong word, but, there was a nervousness. That was the word that was used in that interview, wasn't there? There was a nervousness around Kenilworth Road and a little bit of doubt had crept in, really, as to what we were about to see. Even when the team sheet came out, though, me, myself, I could still see a way that it was a back five. Obviously, it wasn't. It was a back four, but it was just good. It was good to see. Obviously, we did learn in the lead up to the game that, the injury curse has struck again and 3 more were out injured. I'd kind of thought that Jerry Yates had some form of concussion the way he came out at half-time against Lincoln and went back in again, not looking in the best of health. So I saw that one coming, but we didn't see Nigel Longwake or Jordan Clark having injuries. So we had to change anyway. I don't know if that forced Matt's hand into going to a back four or whether he was going to do it or whether Gary Sweet's interview forced it. Who cares? We got there and so many more people look so much more comfortable in that formation.
Yeah, it did. It looked really comfortable. In fact, I thought that that's the big takeaway you can have from the game, and we're still lacking killer instinct, though not options for it. So that's still something that's got to click a bit. But there were runners and stuff in attack. But considering how, I thought that they'd lose because Doncaster was second in the league, going well, champions of Division League 2, and they didn't really have a sniff. And that was down to the defence, all knowing what they needed to do. The tackling was on point. Ming Fanner had an absolute stormer, real energy and drive. He broke stuff up, but he also, was that link man between those attackers. And Wells's runs, for probably the first time I've seen this season, looked really useful because there was that drive from midfield and everything seemed to click well, apart from like getting the goal early on. I think I tweeted after 20, 25 minutes that, barring that aspect, everything had gone pretty well because they looked fluid. There was attacking verve. Shayden Morris, he's a singular-minded man, and I like it. He just wants to get on the outside of his fullback, get to the byline, and cross. He linked up well with Fanny. Saville just had to, protect that back four and put the muscle in. I thought it looked really good. I really did. I was really happy with it. I thought it was initially. I thought it was a 4-4-2, but it wasn't. It was a 4-2-3-1, and I like that better. I know we talked about 4-4-2, but yeah, I'm really pleased with all of it in terms of it just being putting to bed that Lincoln game to a certain degree, and giving us something that you can see they can work towards now. Because I'm not sure for the 2 previous games people were seeing that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, was it the finished product? No, it wasn't the finished product. Was it going to be the finished product? No, it wasn't. It wasn't going to be the finished product if we had our best 11 available to us, because it's quite a change from a back 3 to a back 4. Hence why, he's probably been reluctant to do it during the middle of the season. But certainly in the areas of the pitch where we want Luton's formation to impress, it was starting to do that. So just for those that didn't see the game, the back 4 was Cal Naismith at left back, Ted Mengi, Mads Anderson, 2 centre-halves, Chris Makosso got the right back berth, and that worked okay. We'll talk about that in a moment. As Jimbo said, 2 in front of them were George Saville and Lamine Fane, although Lamine Fane, when we got the ball, it very much became a 4-1-4-1, didn't it? 2 wide players, Millie Alley on the left, Shayden Morris on the right, and Nicky Wells up front. So 3 changes to the side. Longwake, Clark and Yates were the ones that missed out from starting in the Lincoln game. The immediate thing was there was an intent to go forward. There was more options to go forward. There was more runners, and I just think overall there was more space for everyone to do their thing as well, wasn't there? It was just, this was very, you could tell it was a formation that we've worked on, but we went right back to basics with it. Fullbacks never went past halfway line. Wingers never went past the halfway line the other way. It was very much you 4 are defending, you're sitting in front, and you 5 are attacking, and that was absolutely fine. And like you say, I actually enjoyed watching us for the first half an hour, 35 minutes, actually until the penalty. Game did kind of change then. You kind of thought, oh, please don't let that come back to haunt us, kind of thing. But I thought right up until then, and it's probably the most enjoyable football I've seen this season. Okay, yes, the bar incredibly low, we get that. But if we're moving forward, that was certainly something good to go forward with.
Yeah, I would agree. I sat there. I was really pleased with what was happening in front of my eyes. Enjoying the interplay between the players. They looked confident. They looked up for it. And the
Young
basics.
players as well, wasn't there? There was a vibrancy to that team, particularly going forward. In between Saville and Wells, there were 4 young footballers who are enjoyable to watch. They're exciting to watch, who want to get on the ball, who want to use the ball. They want to carry and run with it. They want to be a threat, basically. And that's what we called for, isn't it? We had a few too many players in this side who are a bit safety, a bit nervy, a bit, happy to go backwards rather than go forwards. But those 4 in particular, Morris, Ali, Fanny and Nelson, every time they got the ball, it was turn and go forward. There was none of this slow-paced nonsense. It was at a speed that we could do it. Of course, everything's going to be quicker when you've got Morris in the team. I mean, that geezer goes from 0 to 60 before he gets to in no time, doesn't he? It's just incredible. But that's what Luton fans want to see, Jimbo. Luton fans want to see young footballers with a bit of pace about them, looking their man in the eye and saying, come on then, let's have you, and going at them.
Yeah, exactly that. In fact, I was just on Twitter this morning, and up came the 4-0 against Doncaster in League One the last time round, some time ago, and we had Jack Stacey doing that down the flanks and trying to get to the byline, and you had Kazenga Lawalawa and stuff like the pace and power, a bit of nous. Obviously, you had Berry, who was picking up useful positions, which again we're going to have to find ways to try and do those sorts of things. I don't think we've got a Berry, by the way, but we did see that more often than not, the Rovers' defence were backtracking and running backwards, trying to pick up these runners who were going here, there, and everywhere. It was a good sight to see, and we hadn't seen that really. It was very disjointed between the midfield and the attack. Apart from when Morris has come on previously, not necessarily against Plymouth. Actually, they doubled up on him, but his debut when we were waxing lyrical against Barnet, albeit at Barnet, it worked. And we were saying, well, the game plan is trying to get it out wide, and yeah, you can do that. But when you've got a middle like they had at the weekend, you can operate down the middle as well, and that's what we wanted. If the wide players are going to stretch it, it gives you more space for the middle. We were talking back then about Nelson doing it, but Fanny came to the party, and this is what I know the club and Bloomfield were pretty excited about that they were getting. He did that at Boreham Wood. By all accounts, I didn't see the game in the pre-season, but he obviously scored 2 goals. But then he gets concussion, is out, and then he gets illness. So he's a bit behind, but if that's a starting point for Lamine Fanner, then you don't get him out of the team, as far as I'm concerned.
There's absolutely a footballer in him. I've always been convinced there's a footballer in him. Just the athletic nature of him. There has to be a footballer in him. And we saw glimpses of it yesterday. We had a penalty in the game. Should have had another one. Our dear friend Matty Pearson, who was in our team in that game that you mentioned a moment ago, blocked across with his hands high up on his arm, admittedly, but it was still hands, particularly if the handball that was given at the other end was a handball. This was a handball, but nothing doing. I mean, let's be fair, the referee, if he'd put a blue shirt on, you wouldn't have known that he weren't a Doncaster player, which he gave absolutely nothing apart from the penalty in the first half, and he kind of had to give that anyway. I mean, what with all the handballs, foul throws and everything, I thought at one stage I was watching netball, not football. It was just mad.
It was a frustrating aspect, I think. And obviously for that one that Pearson's launched himself at, I think you can make a case that it wasn't. It was, but there's a lino right next to him looking directly at it, and on reflection, I think there probably should be a penalty. Really,
there's a fan in the Kenilworth end looking directly at it. Yours truly, and it absolutely was. I was like jumping up and down like a lunatic, more so than I normally would be. It was just obvious, but. The good thing was we kept on coming, and we did keep on coming. We had that brilliant chance that Lamine, it was just slightly too high for him to get his foot over, wasn't it? And the keeper he shoveled it around the post, really, didn't he? It was a very weird save. And then sort of later in the first half, why do we want Shaden Morris in this team? We want Shaden Morris in this team, if not to go past his man, which he was doing at will, to be fouled by his man, because free kicks and corners are absolutely fine, and it was Morris who got fouled by the left back. Saville puts the ball over, and Pearson tried to get us a goal earlier on in the half, and this time he contributed to it because he completely lost Cal Naismith, who couldn't miss his header from a couple of 3 yards out. Buried it, celebrations, and there was just a collective sigh of relief, wasn't there? Because we deserved that goal. There was absolutely no way we didn't deserve that goal. You're kind of wondering, we've had lots of crosses. Morris has got into good positions. Ali's got into good positions. Zach's got into good positions. Nothing's really come of it. But it was just a relief when it went in. It was nice.
It was like, yeah, it was pleasurable half at that point, albeit I had some people tweeting me and saying, well, we haven't scored again against a team that's come up, and, 30 minutes in, we still haven't scored. But, other than that point, the actual play and the application and everything that we wanted that wasn't there at Lincoln was, with the added bonus of they looked like a team that were figuring it out going forward. And it was really exciting. Morris does that, but the boys in the middle were doing it as well. And I think it sort of shares the load as well, because everything was a focus on Millie Ali, wasn't it? And then now you've got Shaden Morris, and even when he comes off, which I suspect will happen a lot, and I've got no problem with because Kadea's going to be able to do as much damage as well. Then it does share the load with the attacking players and getting down the flanks, because he didn't bring his shooting boots again, Millie Ali, did he? Smacked one miles wide and high. But yeah, we needed green shoots of optimism, didn't we? And that's what that half gave us. And I think it petered out a bit in the second half, but not to any like worrying extent. Rovers were never in it. And that's why I'm talking that what I took away from the whole game really was how comfortable and solid Luton were. And again, every time Luton have won a game, they've done it via a clean sheet. And this was the cleanest of the clean sheets.
It really was, yeah. Can Luton play football in a 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, 4-1-4-1, however you want to see that midfield three? Well, you better believe we can, because the move for the penalty was delicious. It was, I think 6 players were involved in it down in that left-hand corner. And then the ball went to, there's a lovely little ball into Nicky Wells, who would have shot. He was through on goal, wasn't he, if the geezer hadn't clipped his heels. Bailey, who you referenced in the preview for scoring goals, thankfully, got in the way there. Fair play to the keeper. He's made an absolute stunning save from the penalty.
I didn't see it because there was a Kenilworth Road post in the way, so I didn't see how it went. And then if they showed a replay in the press box screens, I did not see that either. So I've no idea. It must have been a good save. It looked like a decent shot.
Yeah, he hit it well. If you want to be really, really critical, and I don't, but if you want to be critical, you'd say it was halfway up the goal and it's a height that he could save. But he hit it well. And he just pushed it around the post. Fair play to him. And that's fine. Were our heads going to drop at that point? That was the question, wasn't it? But no, they didn't. We got to half time. That was important, because if you think of Plymouth, we got back to 1-1, just had that moment of good thing, and we didn't get to half time.
They had a flurry of sort of set pieces towards the end, didn't you? And I think it's understandable if everybody's thinking this is the moment where it all goes wrong, because that's what's happened so often. But it didn't, and they finished that half without having a shot on target. It was very impressive. You do still have to say that they were second in the division after 8 games, 9 for them, I think, maybe. They're doing all right, Doncaster.
They dropped down a little bit, hadn't they? Because they lost the game before. They were second the day that we went to Lincoln. They were second. They dropped down slightly, hadn't they? But even so, they were above us in the table on merit. They'd just gone to Tottenham and put in a decent performance in the cup with however many changes. They're a respectable side, Doncaster. Do I think that they're the best team that we've played? No, I'd say Bradford, Cardiff, Lincoln were all better than those, but that's fine. What I liked about what we made Doncaster do was the amount of space between Doncaster's midfield and Billy Sharp was the chasm that was between Carlton Morris and our midfield last season. It really was like watching it in reverse. And there were a few times where I sat there and I said to people around me, Savills 30 yards from their goal here, because we had them hemmed in that much that Saville could creep that far forward. Whereas last season, the defensive midfielder was 30 yards from our goal because we were getting pushed back so much. There's so much good that can come of this. And you think of all the players that we've got to come back into this squad, whether they get into the 11 is now very much a question mark, but there are 12 players missing. Some, even if they don't get into the side, that's a right strong bench that we're going to have from this. And I'm really optimistic about what we can do under this formation. Of course I am. I've been banging on about it on here for the last 12 months, so I really want to see what it can do. But if that's what it can do after no more than a week's training with it, and presumably patched up training at that, given the injuries, then I think we can live up to what we was told we were going to get in that Gary Sweet interview of minimum expectations of playoffs and automatic promotion preferably.
I mean, ultimately, that's where you want to be. I think I would understand anybody that's still a bit cautious about saying that right now, and that's understandable because of the month we've had, really. But the signs were there that something more positive can happen, and we just hope that they can kick on from this. And you've got to imagine, as well as the 12 players that were missing, Makoso's not a right back. He looked very good right back, mind you. Mengi's played 2 games. He looked back to somewhere approaching his best. The whole back four were fantastic, actually. We give them all props because they were sticking their boot in. They were You're trying to play the ball out. Makoso making darting runs every now and again, and it was all just simple stuff, and we called for it. You called for it. Simple stuff. Too many instructions. Probably play a system that everybody's comfortable with or understands, and it worked. So yeah, I think that you should be. I am optimistic, and I would be with those people who are cautiously optimistic, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. It is only one game, but there's an awful lot of people in the build up to this telling us in person or on the comments or on social media that we've not had a good game. I don't think you can say that really. But Burton was a good attacking display. You've got to say that Burton aren't a very good side, but it was decent. And you said probably you've watched 2 hours of decent football out of the entire start of the season, those 8 games, which, it was pretty damning really at the point, but this was a lot better. And it was a way forward. And coming after that interview, which he had to come out and probably give, and, you have to applaud him because we'd called for it. And lots of people had called for it. It's not just us, so we're not saying that. Props to Justin Dealey and Simon Oxley for asking those questions. It could have left egg on the face if they weren't very good. Although I think he did caveat that it wasn't just on this Doncaster game, it was this phase of games. But still, everybody, football fans, live for this game, the next game, and we've all got very short memories. So the fact that it was just a very pleasing afternoon all round. In fact, a very pleasing Luton weekend afterwards. So Tycee Gallagher won her boxing title fight as well. So congrats to her. So yeah, a very pleasing sporting weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge shout out to Tycee. Well done. Brilliant to keep the town out there in two sports. Yeah, as you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, Jimbo, that I couldn't see where we were going with that other formation. We couldn't defend, we couldn't attack, we got to the stage where we couldn't complete 5-yard passes to each other. It had just run its course, completely run. I mean, it had run its course a while ago, but absolutely 100% run its course. Now you're kind of like, well, where can we go with this one? Because for a starting block, and it was only a starting block, don't get me wrong, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we were brilliant or anything else, that that I saw what I would expect to be seeing 6 months down the line of a continuity side that plays in this formation. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I just first of all, I like the back four, the organisation of it, because we ain't had that in a back three. I like the fact that Anderson looked completely composed in a 2. I thought Mengi looked much more solid in a 2, seemed to know where he was, who he was. Anderson picked up Billy Sharp. Mengi was the spare guy, and that worked perfectly well. I agree with you. I thought Mengi played really, really well yesterday. Much better than what he did at Lincoln, as you would be. Second game is always going to be better than the first game, isn't it? And that makes a lot of sense. I thought Cal Naismith was solid at left back, and what he gives you is a good outlet on the ball. He can either play into Saville or he can play into Ali, or when we need to, we can go a little bit longer. That was the other thing I liked. When we were pressed yesterday, we weren't pressed too much in that first half, but when we were, we'd go into Wells direct. Okay, Wells isn't going to win many headers against Pearson and his friend, but what we have then got are 2 young mobile midfielders getting right up his backside, ready to pick the second balls up, and then we get going from there. Again, that was a good plan. I liked the way the midfield interchanged. Fanny was combination of a 6 and an 8, wasn't he? Depending on when we had the ball, when we didn't have the ball, that was good. We all know about Nelson. We saw that against Burton. And then he got arguably the 2 best wingers in the competition. Morris looks really, really good. Have we sorted out that centre forward spot? Maybe not. Maybe that's a spot. Well, that is a spot for Al Hamady, isn't it? And that's to come.
I mean, that's what that formation does, doesn't it? Because you get the pace men around him as the backup 3, and you've got a point man up the front. I don't think Al Hamady's lacking in any pace whatsoever, but that's what that formation does. But it also doesn't mean you've got, like you say, as Rovers had, a massive chasm between your midfield and your attack. That wasn't there because Fan is a box-to-box man. Saville's not shy in getting forward, even though he's supposed to be the bloke sitting there, marshalling everything. And that's good for options. And that is what we saw, options.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was a pleased boy at half time. Maybe slightly sort of what might have been in terms of the penalty, because had that penalty have gone in, I'm convinced we'd have gone on and won 3 or 4. But it didn't, and as I said, it was a good save, and that's fine. Second half was a bit different. Listen, the second half was always going to be different to the first half for 2 reasons. They couldn't really not come back out at us, could they? And also, we were always going to tire. You look at the personnel that were on the pitch. I think I'm right in saying at the end, only Kearley and Saville have played in every single game this season of the people that finished the game. So we're always going to tire. Morris, obviously, we've heard from Matt, kind of started feeling something at half time. They gave him another 10 minutes, and then they got Gideon Gadir on. That's absolutely fine. Marvellous Nakamba, good to see him back. That was a positive as well. Bodie, we'll come on to him in a minute, because what a cameo that was from what you wanted. But we did tire. That's fine. Not much football in the legs and things like that. They were throwing attacker after attacker after attacker on as well. But could still be here now, and they weren't scoring.
Yeah, I mean, the only chance they really had was on the counter, so that's something that they can work on. And with the 4, that's okay. Like we say, it's not a finished article, and obviously the final ball there was pretty wayward for one of them, and then Molyneux slashed at one at the other. But other than that, they didn't threaten. A few balls into the box, which the big lads did deal with, which you would expect them to. And that's why it really was a game for the defence, because after conceding 3 goals in the previous 2 games, having gone into that Plymouth game talking about having the meanest defence, regardless of how it came about, and we've discussed how they probably got a bit lucky here and there, to recapture some meanness there, get a clean sheet, but do it so convincingly, really. Yeah, you might say, and there will be people out there who just we've been on a sort of downward spiral for so long. I half understand some people who are just like really relentlessly like not having it. I can. I'm recovering curmudgeon myself, as I've always said. But you do look to like penalties missed and go, that's where it goes wrong. You do miss. You look to late flurries of set pieces. That's where it goes wrong, and it's understandable because it often has gone wrong. Somewhere along the line, you've got to stop the rot, and that's what that performance could be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It was always going to, the longer it went stayed 1-0, it was always going to become about winning rather than looking good in the second half, wasn't it?
And once like Nakamba came on and those changes, Bramwell, it kind of felt like they're just settling for the 1-0. Which ultimately, in the long run, you're like, I don't really like that. But in the context of this game, perfectly happy with that, because they weren't threatening. None of their players were scaring at all, although I like the look of Molyneux, I have to say. But none of them particularly frightful. That you could just do that. And you knew Marvellous, regardless of him not having all these minutes and matches. And I think you could see that. He probably needs to lose a bit of timber. Who am I to say? But he can still sit there. He doesn't run all over the place anyway. He can read the game well, and he can sit in front of in the defence and mop things up. He can do that. And so, they used all the resources they had at their disposal, and it worked. And it relieved pressure, and I think dialed down the heat on a week that had been really, really red hot for all the wrong reasons. So in that sense, I think that can help. That it can bode well. You've got to build on it, of course, but it wasn't a pleasant week, was it? It was a really quite stressful week.
You just had to win the game of football, didn't we, really? We had to get away from this 4 defeats in 6. We had to get away from this players don't care and things like that attitude. We had to get away from just losing, didn't we?
On that point alone, you can't say that they don't now.
No.
But something was going wrong, and maybe it's the formation because they've changed that and things have turned around, and maybe it was just all these players knew. There's probably so many different aspects that feed into this narrative that they don't care. But when you see it on the pitch at Lincoln, you can legitimately say it. I think that they've arrested those viewpoints. I've not really heard them as not at all, actually. I haven't heard them or seen them on social media, and I haven't had people saying that to me. And I think that had to be dealt with in the right way, and performing in the way they did was the right way to do it.
Yeah, people gave their all for the cause yesterday, and that's Saturday, and that was absolutely fine. Mengi at the end, he's down on his haunches because he's, done his first 90 minutes in an awful long time. I wouldn't even like to guess when. Well, did he do the whole 90 minutes at West Brom? I don't think anyone did they, that day? But, it's his first 90 minutes in a long time. So he's bound to be down on his haunches, but he's put a shift in. He's got his clean sheet as a team, and fair play to him for that. Mads Andersen hasn't been back too long, has he, since the games that he missed? Again, done 90 minutes. Okay, they weren't dragged here, there and everywhere. That's the whole point in this formation. You're not going to be dragged here, there and everywhere because more of our players are at the other end of the pitch. We keep on saying it, don't we? But
it's remarkable, isn't it, that all the marks in the pro column for the three at the back and the wing backs and stuff is to try and be attacking. But we're more attacking in that formation on Saturday with 4-2-3-1. That was far more attacking. And he's always talked about Bloomfield. He's always talked about wanting to move to a 4 at the back. We thought 4-3-3. But it can be that, but it can switch to the 4-2-3-1, which to give you a bit of variation. That was far more attacking than anything we've seen so far because, it looked muddled before. People didn't understand it quite well, and it was square pegs in round holes, and it's still, but it was on Saturday to a certain extent, but it was a formation that people understood, and the instructions were probably quite simple, and so it worked.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, you're right about, in the fullness of time, we'll be a bit if we sort of sit back and defend on a 1-0 lead, because you don't bring Gideon Kadir on for the last half an hour to sit back on a 1-0 lead. This was just the context of the situation. A, we had to win. B, players are still getting back to 100% full fitness. C, there's lots of players to come back. But in, say, 3 months' time, when all of that is less of a problem, you would expect this team, when it's 1-0 up, to go on and score late goals and make it 2 and 3 because of the players that we're going to have coming off the bench. Your Izzy Joneses, your Gideon Kadirs, all of these strikers that we've got, your Jake Richards and all of these exciting young players. So that bodes well. All I wanted to see was a team that looked better going forward. Were we perfect going forward? No, we still weren't perfect. But I think we referenced it in the last podcast that in 8 games, Luton players had contributed to 4 big chances being created. We had 3 yesterday. So we almost matched 8 games in one afternoon. And that's against a decent side. Not the best side in the division, admittedly, but a side who are on the up. Very much what we were 6 years ago when we'd come out of League Two. You can tell that they're a side that's got a lot of momentum behind them. And you could tell that just from their fans. Their fans are enjoying themselves.
Yeah, they've just had a good day out at Spurs as well in the week and fared well there. 7 changes there, ran them really close in a 2-1. It was a Luton lad that scored the goal, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And it's, and so that's what I wanted to see, and that's what I saw. I still think that we can spread our attacks out a little bit better. I still thought we went down Millie Ali's side a little bit more than what we needed to. Maybe it was just because Ali was on that side and Morris was right in front of me, and I was desperate for him to keep on tearing the left back into shreds. And also we can use the middle even more than what we have done. But as I say, just when you looked at Luton in the opposite half of the pitch on Saturday, there was so much more space for so many more players. And we'd got predictable in the other formation. If you stopped Millie Ali playing, you stopped Luton playing, because we couldn't go through the middle. We couldn't really go wide the other side. And we all know the situation with the wing backs not coming forward and all of that. Hopefully we'll never have to do that again. But there was on Saturday. And there was space, and you give Zach Nelson space. Certainly if you give Ali and Morris space, you give Fanny space. Even Saville a bit of time to pick a ball out, he'll do it. we're going to be dangerous. I expect us to be an awful lot better than what we were on Saturday going forward, because that's just the start of where we're at. And again, with players coming back and players building up to fitness. But we have definitely got the players for this formation. Have we got the right back for it? Probably not. Can Chris Makosso play there until we have? Absolutely he can, and that's fine, isn't it? Can Longwake play there when he comes back from injury? Probably, yeah. So we don't have to flog Makosso like a dead horse. And obviously Makosso will go into the centre somewhere along the line as well. But yeah, for a starting point, I'm just glad that I sat there and enjoyed a game of football for 45 minutes because, like you said, I've not enjoyed much of it for a long time, really. I mean, even when we were winning games in the Championship at the end of last season, there was a heck of a lot of grinding about it, wasn't there? It was only that second half against Bristol City where the goals flowed and a couple of other sort of brief moments that I've really sat there and enjoyed it. And I sat there and enjoyed it yesterday, and Morris was one of the reasons, but Fanny was the large reason, wasn't he? There's a footballer there, Jimbo. I can see why the world and his dog supposedly wants him, because he's just got athletic attributes no one else in this side's got.
Yeah, you're not going to shake him off the ball, but he nutmegged one fella and he was box to box. He was driving, but he was also sticking his foot in. He even got into one goal scoring position.
If he'd scored
pretty much everything,
that would have rounded off. Well, I wouldn't have rounded it off because it was early in the game, but it would have been the complete performance if he'd scored that. If he's got goals on his game as well. Whew.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. We've got to see that, I suppose. But, he scored two in the pre-season that we mentioned, and that was where they were hoping he would be able to contribute, even though he didn't really score that many in AIK in Sweden. But, he's now been in English football long enough that he needs to grab hold of it. And I think he can in this division. There's not many midfielders that are going to be able to cope with him. What was telling for me is when I'm thinking, they were asking us, who do you want for man of the match in the press box? I'm thinking, well, I've got some choices here. And I hadn't had that before. And some of them, you're like, could we not give it to any of them? Do you know what I mean? In some of the games. But I for a while, until Shayden Morris went off, I was like, well, you could give it to Shayden, you could give it to Lamine for sure. There's other, if you're talking about defensive, there's some players that have played really well, and I thought Makosso had. And it was only really the fact that Shayden Morris went off on 55 minutes that, and Lamine stayed on for another 10 or so, that I went for Lamine. But he looked really good, and I've not really seen him that much. And if that's the benchmark, then we should get pretty excited.
Yeah, because I thought he looked good at Coventry in the Cup as well. And then we've had all of this situation where he's been ill and everything else. Stick some cotton wool and some sort of iron cladding around him and make sure that he's absolutely good to go, because, yeah, he could be a difference maker. And, I'll ask you a question in a minute about the future of the team. But before we do, it's the first time I really saw Bode in a performance that I would sort of attribute that you could judge someone on. You couldn't judge him on the Linker performance because it was just lifeless, and I didn't see him against Plymouth. He's got some attributes as well, hasn't he?
Oh, he was my other choice. I probably couldn't give it to him because he hadn't been on there. But as a cameo performance, as a lone striker, I'm not sure I've seen a hold-up man like that since probably James Collins. It was fantastic, and he was, athletic and strong. But whether the ball got knocked up to him in the air, he could bring it down. And there was one turn, fantastic, and then he showed a bit of pace. Even he went into the advertising board, and you should see the advertising board, I suppose, because I think that advertising board is in the injury room along with all the other long-term absentees. He is a unit, and he, for a player that they've signed for potential, you saw it all there in that performance. And that was really pleasing, that they could have found another jewel here.
Yeah, I'm not saying he ploughed through that advertising boarding, but I heard the wall of the enclosure scream at him when that contact happened. Because when you are knackered, and when you are hanging on for a win, not hanging on in terms of they're about to score imminently, but you're hanging on for the full-time whistle. You need an outball, don't you? Yeah.
He was the outball, and it relieves so much pressure. And if they couldn't get it off him, and they'd have to foul him, and then it's okay, let's calm it down with a free kick, get 20, 30 yards up the pitch. And yeah, it was, yeah. I mean, I think people were looking at his goal scoring record from Gillingham, which wasn't particularly great, but then he's playing for
Gillingham.
he's playing for Gillingham and Gareth Ainsworth. So, if it was, that was the same with Adebayo, wasn't it? I think he probably scored a few more. I think he was into probably double figures just for Walsall when we signed him. But he came as a raw prospect, and when he got his chance, he took it. Now, he didn't score a goal, Bodie, but everything else about striker play was absolutely top notch.
Yeah, it was, yeah, because we didn't need him to score Saturday, did we? That wasn't really I mean, obviously, of course, if we'd scored, it would have helped the situation. Been 2-0, we'd have been out of sight. But his main role was to hold the ball up, to take some pressure off the defence, to give them a breather, to spend 30 seconds running up the field and breaking the clock down. You know, there's a couple of times he ended up with the throw in the corner going into injury time, didn't he? And just things like that, just little things like that. The longer we keep the ball away from our defence, you know, no one's going to score, are they? And like you mentioned, I mean, we finished with a back three, didn't we? I mean, again, that's fair enough. It was all about winning in that last 10 minutes. So you go to a back three, you get as many defensive players as you can. Thankfully, Molyneux shanked that shot wide, although Keeley was coming out to close him down anyway. So I think he would have saved it even if it was on target. Yeah, it was a positive afternoon. I know people have sort of said to me, "Is that how low the bar's got that you think that was positive?" Well, spoiler alert. Yes, that is exactly how low the bar had got at Lincoln last week. That anything going forward of shoots of life, anything that I could sit there and watch and think, well, we might get somewhere long term doing this, was where we were at.
Yeah, I mean that level of pessimism has started to grate on me a little bit. I understand, like I say, I can understand it because things have gone so wrong for so long and it's been so bad. But when you see a little green shoot, to constantly say, well, you know, is the bar that low? Or, well, it was only one game, or yeah, we only scored one. But trying to find the negative out of it. I don't get that, because I genuinely enjoyed that game of football for 70 minutes. It was a bit of a grind after that, but not a stressful grind. It was just seeing out the game, managing the game, which is good as well. In all those aspects that you can do that, and it wasn't harem scarum in any way, shape, or form. And even with 6 minutes added on, you're thinking, no, that's fine. We can do this. Because Bodie was doing so well. Even Bramwell came on and done so well. Like he was running up the wing trying to
Kadir the other side.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, it has started to grate on me, that sort of viewpoint. And but the only way that will change is to continue this, performance, output, wins, obviously, but to show that they're this team that we think that they could be. They've got the players there, even though some people don't think they have. I do think they have. You've got to make them play. You can't have a bunch of great players and not have them gel, and that's the trick, isn't it? So there were signs there that this team will fight for each other, play for each other, can pass to each other, will find each other with crosses, and we'll do the hard stuff first and then play. Everything was there. It didn't all click. Was it going to? After the absolutely the despair of Sincil Bank. And, Bloomfield called it unacceptable. And that's right. It was unacceptable. To go from unacceptable to, hey, we could have something here. That's a massive leap in itself. And I think that people should be looking at it in a positive way.
Yeah, they should. They should, yeah. This is the football that we want to play, This is why you and I have been calling for this back four for so long, because we have got good players. We've got good attacking players. We haven't really got outstanding defensive players. We've got players who can put in outstanding defending performances, but our best footballers at this football club are attacking players. They have been for a while, and that's why we want to see a formation that allows us to play more of these attacking players. And And that's what we got. I mean, you look at the players who came on yesterday, forget the 12 that are out. You look at the players that came on yesterday. Gideon Kadir came on yesterday. Bode came on yesterday. Jake Richards came on yesterday. Lasse Nordos was sat on the bench yesterday. That's 4. And I've not even mentioned the 12 that are out. We've still got Al Hamadi to come back. He's got to find, or he might have to find, a different role for Jordan Clark when he's back. We've got Izzy Jones to come back. We've got a Dauphin who presumably in this formation will play the right back role. We've got so many footballers still to come back. We've just played a game from the absolute depths of despair to, if we're using my ladder analogy, as those that have listened to the podcast for the last year would know that I do, we'd fell off the ladder last week. We're a rung or 2 up it now. Crikey, the ladder's still got 10 rungs to go up, but we're going back up it again, whereas, we thought the ship had sunk.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. And with all those players to come back, and some of them are not so far, that a lot of them are, this phrase, on the grass. The only thing I hope doesn't change the situation is when you get the likes of Izzy Jones back, they don't go, well, we can play a back 3 with wing backs now, because Izzy Jones is a winger who was told to play wing back. Same as Shaden Morris in the previous couple of games, same as Ali. They're wingers, and you need to let them do the best they can on the wings. It's why we're so excited about Shaden Morris, and that will raise Ali's levels. I'm sure of it. Kadea knows he's going to have to probably share the shirt with Morris, but if they're going to run their socks off for an hour and the other one comes on, happy days, because then that other one will run the socks off, and then we'll get to a situation where we are pushing to the final minutes to try and get a goal, rather than just consolidating and sitting back and being comfortable as we were against Doncaster Rovers. And we'll have that excitement of the final few minutes, either trying to rescue something or just trying to push on and get more. I'm absolutely convinced of it. So that hopefully we can now put this 3 at the back to bed. And I'm hopeful, because Bloomfield has always talked of wanting to get to a back 4. And I asked in the pre-match, what are the steps? So if you listen to that, he explained why they hadn't and some of the steps that you could get to it. Hopefully now that is let's start from here. It worked. Let's see what more we can do.
Yeah, build on this town, and I think we'll go places. Particularly the more familiar players get. Look, there's combinations there that played with each other for the first time yesterday. I wouldn't have thought that there's too many times that Fanny and Nelson have been together in central midfield. Not too many times Fanny and Morris have been there, and certainly not too many times that Wells has been in front of the two of them. These are combinations that are only going to be built the longer that we play. And
the thing for me about that formation is with those players, with the 2 that sit and the 3 just behind the striker, not all of them have to be amazing. Like Nelson had a relatively quiet game. He didn't do anything wrong, but he didn't do anything amazing. But Morris was doing fantastic Shaden Morris things. And Ali was getting up and down. There was one moment where he did slow it down. He had a long way to run. And it didn't go full pelt for me. And I thought, there's little things you can tell him, no, you can do that now. Be more confident. So I think that it will come, but it's not all reliant on the one man. Like you say, if you did keep Ali quiet, which most did, then that's the end of our attacking option, and it isn't. So, in every regard, there is something to build on with this formation.
Yeah, I think we might have to endure for the next 3-4 games whilst everyone's getting up to speed and working out who's where and everything else. I think we might have to endure a little bit of sort of last 15 or 20 minutes where it all sort of goes a bit quiet like it did yesterday. But sort of come the end of October into November, I would imagine that, we're going 90 minutes and we're going to attack. And are we going to lose games of football playing a back 4? Yes, we are going to lose games of football playing a back 4. But are we going to win more games of football playing a back 4? Yes, we absolutely are going to win more games. And that's ultimately what we've got to do, isn't it? Got to win more games of football. We're not a drawing team, are we? Ain't done one yet. And long may that continue. Wins are much more. I'd give me a win over 3 draws any day of the week. I know you're unbeaten for longer with 3 draws, but don't I feel better to come and sit on here talking about a win of any kind, because there's been so few and far between. least of all one where we can actually see shoots of progress. Talking of progress, there is progress at this football club off the pitch. And we haven't always been able to sort of comment on it because the football on the pitch, which is obviously what's going to take priority in a review podcast, hasn't been of the standard that any one of us really wants and things. But there is progress being made. The River Lee is flowing now down at Power Court. We do now have dates for when everything's going to happen with regards to Power Court. And we also now know that Gary wants to be in the Premier League in Power Court. He said it in that interview. I'll just echo what you said. Simon and Justin put brilliant questions to him. Fair play to Gary for coming out. I've sat here for, well, what feels like 12 months, but probably isn't that long, asking to hear something from someone high up. I know not everyone out there enjoyed everything that Gary said, and that's fine. You're more than entitled to that opinion. But ultimately, he did come out and say he did come out and answer some questions, some pretty tough questions as well at that. And, so we can't level that at him before. I've heard a fair few of those answers because obviously he came to a trust strategy event last season and was asked similar questions to that. And Justin also put some of those questions to him at the Meet the Manager night as well. So I'd kind of heard one or two things. The director of football question has been posed a few times. But ultimately, we now know that playoffs is the minimum aim this season. We'd like automatic promotion. That sounds good to me. I've always thought that this team should be in the top 6. And what happens from there happens. You've got no divine right to win football matches from there.
I think that were our pre-season predictions. Anyway, I think that anything less than being in the playoff positions is not good enough at all. But we needed clarity, didn't we? That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly that, and that's all it was, wasn't it? Other things that I took out of that interview, Jimbo, allow me to look at my phone so I've got my notes. Is the club's incredibly stable. That's never a bad thing. And of course, he's talking off the pitch. Everyone's asking, why aren't we spending loads of dough on players? Again, I'll counteract that. They have spent money on players, pretty good money as well for League One. Whether they've signed the players or whether the players that they've signed are delivering on the talents that they've got, that question is still to be answered. Even in this formation, they've still got to prove that beyond more than one game. They've got to do that for 10 games and things like that. But it was more about the finance around Power Court. I mean, he stressed 2 or 3 times that Power Court's the most important thing to Luton Town Football Club. I have no problem with that. It absolutely is. We cannot go forward. And by go forward, I mean, if I'm of an era where Luton's natural place in football society is probably mid-table of the Championship or second tier as was. Most of my formative years, Luton had just got relegated out of what is now the Premier League, Division 1 to all of us old sods. And that's generally where we've been. I don't think in modern football, Luton Town can occupy those positions at Kenilworth Road for a sustained period of time. In fact, we've seen that we can't.
Yeah.
So going to Power Court is the biggest thing at this football club. It's not a bad thing. Obviously, all of the sort of surrounding things to it, that because we didn't have any clarification or any communication about it, that people thought that the on-pitch stuff was being detracted to by Power Court. It's not necessarily the case. They have got a plan in place, and he wants to be in the Premier. He'd like to be in the Premier League by 2028. That's ambition.
Well, it's the forward plan that you were looking for. Well, on the importance of Power Court, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, really. And we've been doing this 9 seasons now, and the first one came just after they'd unveiled the plans. It's been that long, hasn't it? But that has always been the case. This club needs that stadium for its long-term sustainability. They're not sexy phrases, not sexy sentences to say, but it is absolutely true. He even laid out the case, didn't he? He said, the club can't survive if they stayed up in Kenilworth Road for much longer. Whereas you hear in, financial predictions, and I don't know how accurate they are, that they could make like a lot of money from every match day, which they are not at the moment. They're kind of breaking even, aren't they? And that's even with all the extra stuff that they're now putting around the apron of of the stadium for match days. The marquee and the good food that's going around there. So they've maximised everything that they can do with that stadium, and that's ultimately why we know that they've got to leave. And we've been banging that drum quite consistently, haven't we? And it is really quite frustrating that bad actors have come into play to try and block it. Then COVID's come along and Brexit and the prices going up and stuff like that. And these things are all really meant to try and test us. But ultimately, in the long run, once it happens, it's going to be a good thing. Now, it's completely separate from people saying, yeah, but what division are we going to be in? Are we going to be able to fill it and stuff? Quite right. I still think that you'll fill it more than it's a 7-year waiting list, isn't there? Is it 7 year? Anyway, a long waiting list for a season ticket. You're going to feel a lot of it. Yes, you'll feel a lot more if you're knocking around the upper echelons of the Championship, and for sure if you're in the Premier League. I think the Championship's obviously more realistic. You've got to be in there to sustain yourself, and then if you ever get a sniff of going to the Premier League, you've got a better chance of, should you get there, of staying there, because you'd be able to spend more money on players and stuff like that. So it's I understand it would be a balancing act that you've got to try and get that, but just having the money of the Premier League doesn't, if you throw it around in this division, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to still get the players. So, I understand that they lost out players in this transfer window because they could meet the valuation of the player, no problem, in this division, but then you've got to try and pay the wages, and then maybe other clubs can pay more. It's not all as simple as, well, where's the Premier League money and why aren't you spending it? But I understand why you would think that, and why you would hope for more, and why you'd want players to be spending a lot of money on. You're not going to get Jay Stansfield from a Birmingham situation, not necessarily buying him, by the way, but you have spent, or potentially from the reports, going to spend $3 million on Al Hamadi, and I dare say a couple of million quid on the other players, some of the other players, Keeley being one. They have spent money. I just think that it's a lot of discontentment, understandably, around the football side of things that feeds into everything else. And I understand that. And I think that's the only way that you're going to get out of that is to, start winning games and make Saturday afternoons more enjoyable, as we have seen.
And keep communicating. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, as fans, we might not like it, but it is a money game now, isn't it? And, the ones that have got the most money generally fill the higher places in the Football League pyramid. And so the line that I took from his interview, there were bits that I'd have liked more on, and there were bits that, I didn't particularly think much of, but was everything combined around Power Court would provide top end of the Championship turnover. Well, that puts us in a good position. If you liken us to Brentford, they wouldn't have had top end of the Championship turnover at Griffin Park. And I know they had a pub on each corner, but they didn't. They didn't have top end of the Championship turnover there. But they did when they went to the G-Tech Community Stadium. And now look at them; they're comfortably mid-table in the Premier League, or they were until they sold Mbuemo and Wissa. Who knows what will come of them? But that's nothing to do with their stadium thing. So I'm fine with that. I do think that I said it last week or maybe the week before, that we need to be careful that we don't do too much with Power Court and less on the football side of things. I think there needs to be slightly better balance with regards to that. And I would like to know things down the line with regards to Power Court about how there's going to be fan protection of the place and things like this. But, we've got 3 years until it's built. But, it's important that there's some sort of fan protection of Power Court so that in the generations and the generations to follow us, that we know that place is always going to be Luton Town's home and things like that. But yeah, no, right now I'm fine with it. Would we fill 25,000 in the Championship? We're probably going to have to give at least 3,000 of that to away fans anyway. So yeah, I think we would do. I'm not seeing too many empty seats in League One at Kenilworth Road. You're immediately for a season or two going to have the novelty factor that people want to go because it's a new ground and everything else. So yeah, I think I think we would. Would we do it in League One? No, but at some point after a few seasons in League One, we wouldn't feel Kenilworth Road either. So I'm kind of fine with that.
There are other non-footballing reasons for it being a bigger capacity, and they've already outlined that it would have 3 or 4 massive summer concerts. Well, the Lamex Stevenage Stadium had a summer concert, had Richard Ashcroft there, so that's a tiny little stadium. So if you imagine 25,000 seaters, and you're getting, he's admittedly a heritage act now, isn't he? But someone of that calibre 4 times a summer boosts it up. There's other reasons for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know that I'm a Hampshire cricket fan, and as Hampshire, they've obviously got an alignment with Southampton Football Club. So when something's happening at St Mary's, Hampshire members get to hear about it. And whilst I'm no fan of Take That, obviously Take That's at St Mary's next year. St Mary's is, 30,000? It's only got 5,000 more seats in it. So, yeah, if it opens its doors to those. And also, the other thing that, for the life of me, I don't know why no one's come out and said, is you can create a younger fan base at Power Court that you just can't do at Kenilworth Road because there's no tickets. I know this as well as anyone, and so many of you out there that are parents will know this, that if you want to take your kid with you, not in my case, my nieces, they simply can't come with me because there isn't enough, we can't get tickets anywhere near us, and, you can't, most games are sold out. Maybe this season is not the season for that, but certainly in the Championship, the only games that my nieces could come to were the cup games. So they're going to come to the Brighton game next month, and hopefully from there we can do that. In a 25,000 seat stadium where you're not sold out every week, if you want to take your kid, you're going to be able to take your kid. And all of a sudden, an aging fan base, and this is an aging fan base, I'm not going to share all of the information, but just going on the Trust membership, it's an aging fan base. All of a sudden, we open our doors to a younger fan base. It's a lot easier to get to Power Court if you're a teenager than Kenilworth Road. You obviously can't drive. It's a bit of a trek and not necessarily the safest walk from the train station to Kenilworth Road for a night game, for example, whereas at Power Court, you get off the train, hop, skip and a jump, and then you're into the football stadium. It opens our doors to so many more people coming into the building that it's a good thing. Has the football club died a little bit too on the pitch, died a little bit too much for comfort? Yes, it has. We absolutely should not have got relegated just because of Power Court last season. But from 2028 onwards, the future's very much bright for this football club. And let's hope Saturday was the start of the on-pitch stuff beginning to align with the off-pitch stuff, so that when Power Court does come along, we're ready. We're in the Championship. We're only a good season away from being in the Premier League. And then who knows, once you're in Power Court and you're in the Premier League and you've got a chance of surviving, a la 2 years ago, it's not just Daiki Hashioka who's coming through the building. It's 3 or 4 in January to make sure that 18th becomes 16th or 17th becomes 15th rather than where we had to be. So all good things. I get why people didn't like everything that Gary says, and that's fine. But I thought, considering everything that went on, considering the tough questions, considering when it took place after one of the worst pound-for-pound Luton performances I've ever seen, I thought he gave shoots of optimism for the future. I thought he gave a realistic take on where we are right now. Again, not everyone likes to hear it, but I thought from a, I don't want to say business point of view, but from a neutral point of view, so to speak, not a fan and not a business point of view, I thought he gave an account of where we were right now. Would I as I said, would I have liked to have heard more on a few other things like protection of the ground and things like that? Yes, I would. But ultimately, there's only so much time, and you obviously ask the more important questions, particularly when the ground's 2.5 years away. But really and truly, I sat here for months and months and months wanting to hear something. I've heard something, and let's get on. Let's move on now.
That's the thing. We can't have done that. We can't have said the things we said about that communication being open and then it happen and then complain about it. There's always this thing, and I'm getting it a lot more now, that the questions, it's about asking the questions, but you can't always guarantee the answers that you want. And if you didn't like some of those things, I can fully understand it. There's also some people that once they've entrenched a view in their minds, you can't shake that view. So there'll be people that were Bloomfield out last week that will still say the same thing, regardless if in the next few games you can see those improvements built on. They will still say that, and there are people that have got their views about Gary Sweet or how the club's being run, and that won't change. But regardless of that point of those issues, the only thing that was important, or not the only thing, one of the main things that were important is he did come out and he did do it and he did say those things, which is what we've been saying. You know, we wanted him to come on here, but it's not about whether he comes on here or any other podcast or speaks to a newspaper. Nothing about that. It's that it's said, and they've been and it's been said.
And hopefully that's the start of something more regular. It doesn't necessarily have to be Gary. There's an awful lot of people behind the scenes at the club. Hopefully on a monthly, bi-monthly, however long basis, that they do come out and say more stuff. Someone comes on here, you get the opportunity to interview some of these people, all of the journalists and things like that. And that's how communication works going forwards, that we all get insights. We get different insights because you'll ask different questions to what Justin and Simon asked, because obviously they're broadcasters, you're journalists, and we get
they are too, by the way, Justin and Simon.
Oh yeah.
He meant I'm written.
Yeah, sorry, written. Yeah, written journalist. Well, sits in front of a laptop and presses a few buttons, but yeah. Yeah, there is a difference there, but it was good. It was good. We heard from the man pulling the strings. We won a game of football. We saw that the manager was peed off. You certainly saw. You got a lot of one-word answers in the press conference on Friday, and we saw that the players were cheesed off, and they reacted how we wanted them to react. Now we want them to take Saturday's performance, lift it a bit more, keep on lifting it until we're at that team that we were 6 years ago in this division. And I'm sure that with the personnel we've got, we can do it. I'm absolutely sure. Correct scores. There were a few of you. Blitz, Phil Clark, LTFC, Barry Braham, and David Coop. Well done. You all went 1-0 Luton. And you've got 3 points, which is going to hopefully put you onto our leaderboard, which is about to appear on this screen right now. I'm in the process of getting that sorted. Oh, by the way, we'll get that on the Trust website within the next couple of weeks so that you can see exactly where you are going forward. But yep, well done to you four guys. Nothing for us, Jimbo. Pessimistic you, and well, not quite as pessimistic, but still not right me.
Yeah, mine's reverse psychology by stealth now. That's what we're going for.
Righto. Fair enough. Much better afternoon. That's it's nice to sit here and talk about a win, even if there's still a little bit more to come in the future, hopefully. Thanks for watching, listening, however it is that you consume this podcast. We really appreciate your support, particularly this week. Podcasts are going to come thick and fast at you. I'm going to try and keep them short, but obviously this one's a little bit longer because there was an awful lot going on before the game. But they'll be a bit shorter as they come along later in the week. Obviously, we've got the Blackpool preview, which will be our next podcast. That'll be out to you sometime around Tuesday. Hopefully, those of you that go into the game can listen to that. If you're not, you'll have time to listen to it previously, and then we'll do a preview of Stevenage, and then we'll see what happens after the Stevenage game. We should hear early this week if that Huddersfield game's going ahead, because international call-ups generally happen 2 weeks out, don't they? So we'll work out what we're doing around the Huddersfield game when we know if and when it's going ahead.
Yeah. Can I also do a plug as well? Because we didn't get to talk about it in here, and that's quite right, because I've written a story about it anyway. So by the time this comes out, the story about it anyway. I had a really interesting conversation, post-match press conversation with both Bloomfield and Cal Naismith after the Doncaster game, and we delved into sort of how they managed to go from the Sinsel Bank saga to winning against Doncaster and affect the change that we've talked about in this press conference. So I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and the answers they gave, and you can read that now on the Lutonian.com. So please do.
Yep, check that out. Obviously, Jimbo will give a match report to that website on Tuesday. I'll do an instant reaction. We'll have a preview out before then, and everything else. So yeah, back to normal. Busy week, but hopefully, well, who knows? Even a 9-point week, that'd be absolutely lovely, wouldn't it? Thanks again to all the folks at Marsh House, the proud new home of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, and to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music. Until next time, which, as I say, will be a preview of that trip to Bloomfield Road. From Jimbo and myself, that was much more like it, Town. Keep that up.